So I've had a few people asking me how I do certain audio effects on my stream, especially the ones that I use on my starting screen.
One time for my day ones. My day ones. One time.
So as you can see there, I have a few effects and I thought it'd be a really great idea to do a video talking about different audio effects that you can use to help do some really cool visualizations, as well as just provide some really cool information. Now, the really fun thing about these is that you could be as simple as you want or as creative as you want, and you can use these whether or not your stream focuses around music, like if you're doing DJ sets or you're a musician, or even if you just have particular scenes that are a little bit more music focused, like my starting, ending, be right back, and just chatting scenes. All right, so let's first talk about the plugins. The first main plugin is going to be called Scale to Sound. This is the one that does that screen pumping effect that I showed. I use it on my logo, and it's a really cool one. It allows you to do some really fun things with the beat, and there are some things about it that I wish were a little bit more involved, but we'll go over those later when I talk about some of the things that I've done. The next plugin is called Waveform. This one is really, really cool. It allows you to really visualize some music using waveforms like you'll see on certain music channels and stuff like that on YouTube. It has a lot of different options, a lot of different styles, and you can get really creative with these as well. Now, for some optional ones, the first one is going to be called Wind Capture Audio. What this does is it allows you to capture audio from specific applications rather than the devices as a whole. This really allows you to kind of split up your audio without using something like Voicemeeter. I use Voicemeeter for a lot of other reasons, so I use that to split up my audio. But if you want to separate your music from your Discord, from your desktop audio, you don't want to add the complexities of Voicemeeter, you can use the plugin like Wind Capture Audio to separate all of those. Now the next one is called Replugs. It is the Reaper VST plugins. This allows you to add a lot of really good audio tools to OBS as a filter. Things like a compressor, delays, EQs, noise gates, all kinds of really awesome things. And this will allow you to adjust how you want your audio to sound. And again, it also leads into some really cool creative things that I will show you later. And the final optional one is Tuna. What this does is it writes information about your currently playing song in different programs and writes it to files so that OBS can then read that and display it on your stream. It works for music sources like Spotify, VLC, Last.fm, YouTube Music, SoundCloud, and a few others as well. All right, so let me show you the elements on my stream starting screen and we can kind of talk about them. So on the logo, we have Scale to Sound doing that pumping feature. We have Wave Visualizer doing those visualizations on the sides. And you could use Tuna for what I'm doing on the bottom, but Pretzel Rocks, the music player that I use for a bunch of my streams, does this by default out of the box, but it works the same kind of way where it writes the information to a text file and an image file, and then you can pull that. So I'll show you how all this works. So let's go ahead and create a new scene. And we're going to go ahead, we'll just call this one scene 4 for now. We're going to add a source, and the first one's going to be the music. So I have one called Max Music, which is the music at maximum volume. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an image. So we're going to go add, we're going to go to image. We're going to add an existing one. We'll do this close face. We'll scale that a little bit and toss that right in the middle. We can even hit transform, center to screen, and we're good. So with that, we can do scale to sound first. So we're going to go to filters. I'm going to move this off to the side and click away from it so you can see how this works. We're going to go ahead and add our scale to sound. We're going to choose our audio source, which was the Max Music. And as you can see now, it's going to pump and move to the music. Now, unfortunately, you can't isolate certain frequencies, but you can do it by volume. So the threshold is anything above this value will start to articulate the image. So right now it's at -40, which is right about here. So you can see that basically the music is always above that. So it's always moving it based on the volume. The audio ceiling would be the max volume that it'll react to. So if you want that to be lower and it to react more, you can do that as well. The minimum size is just going to show how big or small this is going to be. So the difference between these two is pretty important. The bigger the difference, obviously, the more the effect is going to go and the more it's going to work between certain decibel levels. So as you can see, this is pretty jarring, but what you can end up doing is smoothing it out a little bit using the smoothing tool, and it makes it a little bit smoother, a little bit slower, and it kind of eases in those curves so that it's not as aggressive looking. You can also inverse it so that it goes from big to small instead of small to big, whichever one works best for you. So now what we can do is we can look at the visualizer. The Waveform Visualizer is really cool. You can do a lot with it, and you can get really, really creative with this tool. So I'm going to move this down here. We're going to choose our audio source, and we're going to go ahead and do max music. And as you can see here, you get a pretty cool visualizer. There are a lot of options. We have a display mode between curve. You can do bars. You can add more bars. You can change the width of them. All these kinds of things. I would suggest you play around with this quite a bit. You can do stepped bars. You can do a level meter. And you can also do a stepped level meter. Now, what I'm going to show you is if we go back to curve, I am going to go ahead and do a radial layout. Just going to make it a circle. I'm also going to make this the size of the screen. So we're going to fit to screen here. And I'm going to invert so that the audio is going, or the radius is going outwards instead of inwards. And now we're going to adjust this dead zone to be around the face. Another setting I like to do when using the curve especially is the normalize volume. This makes it so that things are a little bit louder within the visualizer, so things are a lot more reactive. I usually leave the channel mode as mono. If you do stereo, it'll have two separate visualizers for the left and right if you want that. I usually leave the FFT size as it is at the 4096, but you can also set the default or move it around and see how that affects your image. The window I leave as Han. The exponential moving average I leave as the temporal smoothing. And then the gravity is going to show how quickly the peaks go back to valleys. So if you increase the gravity to a certain amount, things are going to move a lot slower. And then if you reduce it, things are going to move really quickly. So the smoother you want it, the higher it's going to go. And then what you can do if you want is you can do fast peaks so that the certain big peaks still really push out the image. But in general, it's just a much smoother looking image. Interpolation, I leave as default. The filter, sometimes I'll do the Gaussian filter. It smooths out everything a little bit more. As you can tell, it's a little less jagged. I like it. It just looks a little bit nicer. And then the filter radius will also smooth it out even further. So as you can see, it becomes less and less like individual pieces, and it just moves more like a blob. So whatever you like, we're just showing it for this example here. So let's go about there. So the low cutoff and the high cutoff are what I wish scale to sound had. This allows you to isolate particular frequencies so that if you only want it to react to bass, treble, or, the high frequencies, you can kind of adjust that. So if we wanted it to just be bass, we can bring this all the way down to something like 250 or so. And now it should only be reacting to the bass tones. Again, this is entirely up to you and how you want to play around with this. We're going to leave it, we're going to put it all the way up to the top. The floor and ceiling are going to do the volume, so it's going to be same to what the scale to sound did. This will be the minimum volume that it'll react to, and this will be the maximum volume it'll react to. Now the slope and both roll-offs here, I don't change these all too much, but you can play around with these and adjust the way you want it to work. It will adjust the way that certain pieces of it look, and I play around with these a little bit, but I usually leave these at 0. Now the render mode is cool. You can do a line, you can do the solid, which is the default, or you can do a gradient. And if you do the gradient, you can do some really cool effects here where, you can kind of put a border around something and kind of everything work. It's nice. I like playing around with these. And again, I would highly suggest you kind of go through all these settings and play around with them and see what works, see what doesn't work. So now if you use Tuna or Pretzel Rock's ability to write that information to a text file and an image file, you can add those very easily to your thing here. All you do is you right click, you go to add, you do text. We'll call this one demo. We're going to do read from file. We're going to browse. We're going to find our now playing text that we created. And as you can see, it automatically reads the song name. You can do all of the things that you normally would. You can change your fonts, you can apply different colors, opacities, all that fun stuff. And then you can go ahead and place it wherever you'd like. So could have done this a lot easier. And, you know, we'll throw it wherever we want. Now you could do the same thing with an image. You can do the add. You can go and do image. We're going to do demo album. We're going to find where we're writing that image using Tuna or Pretzel Rocks. And now it'll do the same thing. It is going to grab that image whenever it changes. You can make it so that it unloads the image when it's not showing. And you're pretty good. As long as you change songs, it will change this. Now, let me show you how I've gotten a little bit more creative with this, using frequencies to create a particular effect. So if we go ahead and look at this wallpaper scene that I've had here, you can see that I have a audio source called Music Bass. What that is doing is it is using the filter from the Replugs VST, and it is doing a low pass, which is basically isolating the lower frequencies so that only those get passed through. I have created its own audio source so that this audio source is basically just bassline. Bass lines, bass hits, all that kind of stuff. And then what I did was with the logo, for example, and the filter, the scale to sound is using that audio source as a reference. So it'll only react when audio is coming through that audio source, and the only audio that should really be coming through that audio source is the lower end of the frequency spectrum. So it allows me to do the pumping to just the bass frequencies. And personally, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of a pumping effect. It makes a lot of sense to me. It looks good. I think it reacts a lot nicer. And, you know, it's just one of those really cool ways where over time, I got a little bit more creative and I ended up doing something like this. And, you know, as I mentioned, scale to sound doesn't have that ability to isolate frequencies natively within it. So I had to get a little bit creative. I used another plugin to isolate those frequencies for me. And then I have that audio here. It has to exist on a scene somewhere, but it doesn't have to exist on the scenes that I'm using. And it also does not have to be visible or actually going out to the stream. So if I go to my starting soon, it is still using that effect, and that music is nowhere here, that bass audio source. Same thing with my BRB and my ending. They're the kind of the same thing. And then my just chatting, hello, also has it on there. So this is just one of those ways where I got a little bit more creative and I used another plugin to make up for the shortcomings of the plugin I was mainly using, combine them together, and I got a really cool effect out of it.
Cut him off, old boy. Yeah, I had to drop him last week. Ain't got the time. Stacking my paper. They want my time. They gotta pay up when I'm on my...
Now, if you want me to do a more in-depth video on certain plugins that I've used today, especially the ones that I mentioned were optional, like the WinCap audio or Reaper plugins or Tuna, let me know in the comment section below and I'd be happy to do that. But this is pretty much it. I've started off really simple at one point, and then over time I've kind of adjusted it and changed it to the things that I thought made a lot more sense or things that I liked a little bit more. And you can do that as well. You can be as simple or as complicated as you want with these plugins. You can get as creative as you want. This bass one I just recently did maybe a couple weeks ago. And it's fun. I really like doing it. I like having music as part of my streams, and it's nice to have things that kind of react to it. And with all that said, I do hope you found this helpful, and if not, I at least hope you found it interesting. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribed. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, leave those down in the comment section below. Let me know what you plan on using these plugins for. Let me know if you're already using them and how you're using them. And if you want, you're even welcome to leave some clips in the comments of the ways that you are using it so I can go ahead and check those out. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors, Thoughts Time and Step Back, and thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you do want to see any of the other videos where I talk about things for streaming, you can check out the playlist right up here. And as always, stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.